Yes, so this class is primarily on struck by and content hazards. So from that side we have discussed operations like material handling in the site and also piling operations wherein crane is predominantly used. So this hazard is primarily related to crane operations. So we will be discussing more on crane operations and how safely to operate cranes in today's class. If you see crane, there are so many types of crane and so many ways of handling or using crane in the site. Okay. So, covering completely on crane safety will not be possible. So, I will be covering only a basic safety information with regard to crane, operating crane safely in a construction site. So, now let us start with the class. So, there are so many people who will come in the crane operation, starting from crane erector, then you will have lift director, then site supervisor, then you may also have crane owner, crane user. So, there are a lot of responsibilities assigned to each and every party, rigger, slinger and so on. So, we will be covering the core people who are involved in the crane, in proper lifting crane operation. So, number one, crane erector. So, who is called a crane erector? Crane erector is a person who generally helps in erection of the cranes in accordance with the manufacturer instructions. So, along with the crane manufacturing, you have an instruction. So, based on that, a person erects a crane, he is primarily called a crane erector. So, when 2 or more crane erectors are required, then you should also have an erector in charge to control the operation in order to have a proper monitoring of the crane operations. Responsibilities of the crane erector: he should be competent, he should be fit enough, he should also know how to handle cranes, he should also be able to work confidently and safely at height, so preventing fall hazards and so on. He should also be able to establish what is the weight, what is how to balance load, judge a distance, height, clearances and so on. He should be able to manage the complete operations properly, and he should be trained in the techniques of slinging, and he should be adequately trained in erection, dismantling and working of type of crane being erected, and also in the safe use and setting up of any lifting appliances in the course of all these duties. So, now let us discuss about lift director. So, lift director, he is a person, he oversees a complete operation of the crane and the associated rigging crew. So, he only plans how the lifting has to be done, and he also executes the lifting operation. His responsibility: he should also be competent, he should be present in the job site during lifting operations, he should stop the crane if any unsafe situations are seen in the site, ensure that preparation of area needed to support the crane operations are completed before the crane operations commence, and he should also ensure necessary traffic controls are in place and ensure the personnel involved understand their responsibilities, they know what they have to do and how the signals are communicated, what are the different hazards available. So, he should be able to be clearly communicating it to everyone. He should also be addressing safety concerns raised by any personnel who are in the site and responsible if for the safety of all the personnel in the site. Allow crane operation near electric power lines only when the applicable requirements are met and the safe clearance of the electric overhead power lines are also taken care of. Inform the crane operator of the weight of loads lifted, lifting mechanism, moving, placing loads and so on. So, ensure the crane's load rigging is performed by the designated personnel. So, he should be aware of everything. Responsibilities of the rigger: a rigger is a person who attaches the load to be lifted to the crane hook using proper slings. So, in some places where there are too many operations carried on, so you also refer rigger as slinger also, and along with the rigger and slinger you also have a person called signaller. Okay, so, sometimes when for small operations these people are may do multiple jobs, otherwise there are designated person available for the crane operation. When there is more than one crane available in a particular site for doing all the lifting operations, the crane operator should really know who is the assigned rigger or the signaller for operating the crane, and he should not be confused with the other signallers. Okay. and also the signal communications and so on, he should be very clear before starting the crane operation. And the rigor should be ensuring the weight of the load and approximate center of gravity are all obtained, they are provided, calculated, select the proper rigging equipment, inspecting and compliance with the applicable operating practices. Also properly attaching the rigging equipment to the hook or shackle or any other load handling device. Ensure the rigging equipment is adequately protected from abrasion, cutting or any other damage from load handling activities. We will discuss this after few slides. And knowing and understanding the applicable signals for the equipment use and so on. So, these person also should be competent, fit and be trained in techniques of rigging and slinging, and be capable of selecting a lifting gear and equipment suitable for the load to be lifted and so on. Okay. He should also be able to give precise and clear instructions to the crane operator. Now, what are the signals given by the signaler? So, there are different signals. The main signal in crane operation is a hand signal. Okay. So, this is developed by Crane Institute of America. So, mobile crane hand signals, and there are a lot of crane hand signals. So, whenever a crane is in operation, the crane operator and the signaler should understand the operations signals given very precisely. So, during operations requiring signals, the ability to transmit the signals between the operator and signal person must be maintained, and they should also have a common understanding on what is the mode of signal communication, whether it is voice or whether it is some sort of an other device or a hand signal, it should be clearly informed and communicated. And also sometimes a hard copy of the hand signals should be given to both the parties, so that there is no confusion while taking care of the signals. Voice signals, if the type of signal is used, voice signal is used, the operator and the signal person and lift director must, before beginning the operation, should understand how the communications are and what is the platform used for voice signals and what are the key words which are used and what is the meaning of those words should be clearly understood. Sometimes there is an audible signal also which is approved, which can be in the form of a bell, horn or a whistle, and that is also allowed in terms of signals. Responsibilities of crane operator. So, crane operator, he is also called a crane driver. So, he is a person who operates and does the complete operation. Sometimes if there are no too many people, crane operator should also be responsible for assembling and disassembly, in the sense setting up the crane and also dismantling the crane operations also will be carried out by the crane operator only. So, he directly controls the crane's functions and responsible for the correct operation of the crane in accordance with the manufacturer's instruction book and the plan. He should be competent, he should be fit enough and have adequate training in the type of crane being driven, because there are so many types of cranes, and sufficient knowledge of the crane and safety devices. The stature to operate the crane safely, ability to judge distances, heights, clearances, understand the full duties of signaler, slinger and be familiar with the signal codes, and should be authorized to operate the crane. He should be physically and mentally fit, because crane operators mistakes can lead to very major accidents in sites. The driver may also be responsible for erection and dismantling of the crane. At any one point of time, he should be understanding who are the person who will be communicating with him, and they should be identified. Know what types of site conditions can adversely affect the crane operation, what sort of weather conditions can adversely affect the crane operation, and accordingly he should put off the crane operation when signals are not in good signs. He should be performing daily operation, understand the crane's functions and limitations, and he should not get away from the crane when the crane is on or when the engine is on. So, when he has to get off, then he has to put the engine off and see to that he is having a clear surroundings among the personnel, and then only he should be able to do, and stop the crane operation if alerted by because of any of the unsafe conditions happening in the site. The next is permit to work. As seen in the other lectures, so there is something called hot work permit and so on. So, similarly we also have in cranes permit to work systems. So, permit to work is primarily obtained for any operation in the site which is really complicated or very hazardous in nature. So, wherever necessary, a permit to work system may be necessary to achieve a safe system of work. Primarily, permit to work implies you are evaluating all the hazards and identifying what is the purpose of doing a particular task even under hazardous situations, who is going to do, what is the nature, how long the person will be able to do, and so on. So, primarily it is only for safe operation. So, upon completion of the work, the person who has carried out the work should sign the form or certificate to certify that all the tools have been removed from the crane and all the guards have been replaced, safety devices are operating, and all person working on the crane have been advised that it is no longer safe to do so. So, he has to also be removing all the works. So, now the details of a permit to work system, the crane is clearly identified, the special operations, precautions are all mentioned, the degree of power isolation is adequate for the work being undertaken. So, isolating the equipment means secure against unauthorized restoration of power whilst the permit of work is in force, and so on. So, the safe working load around the crane is really identified, the safe working load is clearly understood, and where there are more than one group of people working there, each person should be given the work permit and the crane should be declared safe for operation, and then only the crane operation shall start. Personal safety. So, appropriate PPE is recommended starting from fall protection. So, there may be hazard on fall protection. So, you may have to have a proper PPE, and also the person who is giving the signals, the signaler should be wearing a fluorescent jacket so that and have a whistle so that he is able to be identified by the crane operator. Access and emergency escape. So, there can be fire hazard as well. So, you may have to have a fire extinguisher and also all the precautions of emergency escape routes and emergency access escapes. Boarding the crane. No person should be permitted to board a crane without obtaining the driver's agreement. The driver should be aware of what precautions the driver should take while the person is on boarding and should carry all of them. When the point of access is out of sight of the driver, a system should be provided to ensure the driver is aware of the other person's whereabouts. Okay. Suppose if the person is sitting in a blind spot, so there should be some sort of a television mechanism or something wherein the driver is able to see the whereabouts of the other person. In case of a crane with the pendant control, a second person should be made responsible for ensuring the pendant is not operated and the person is on the crane. And where more than one person is to board a radio control crane, a driver should be placed in charge of the radio transmitter to ensure the crane is only moved with the agreement of all persons of the crane. Okay. And before starting up the crane, first of all the swing radius, the complete swing radius should be barricaded so that no personnel is coming into the site of the swing radius. Setting of crane is primarily the setting up and assembly of the crane. So, during the planning operation, the appointed person shall give careful consideration for the sitting. So, you should take care of ground conditions, you should take care of other precautions also while you are doing the sitting of the crane. So, all the factors that may affect a safe operation of a crane should be understood. Okay. So, the crane standing position, support conditions, the presence of proximity and other hazards. Primarily, is it close to overhead power lines or maybe there is a building very close by, all these has to be understood. The effect of wind also has to be studied. The adequacy of access to allow the placing of erection of the crane in its working position, and for dismantling and removing of the crane following the completion of lifting operations, all should be noted down. And the appointed person shall ensure the loads imposed by the crane can be sustained by the ground or any other means of support and that are assessed by a competent person. So, whenever a crane is handling a load, the crane plus the load both are supported by the ground condition. So, the ground condition should be verified whether it is really stable for withstanding the load above. The loads imposed by the crane should be obtained from the crane manufacturer to decide on what is the safe load capacity of the crane. Importance of ground conditions: the ground should not be muddy and so on, it should be very stable. If it is otherwise unstable, the crane should not be assembled in those places, or it should be made properly stable and then only the crane assembly has to start. The loading shall include the combined effects of dead weight of the crane, the dead weight of the load and any other lifting arrangement including the slings or the rigging practices. Then dynamic forces caused by movement of the crane during the swinging and lifting and other operations. Wind loads, if there are any, all has to be considered while you are setting up the crane. Now, whenever the crane operations are there, there are certain precautions or certain routine checks which you have to do before starting up the crane operation, and these inspections are too many in case of a crane, because crane is a very large equipment and accidents due to crane are too many in number. So, the inspections start from routine, shift inspections, monthly inspections and annual inspections. Routine, the non-routine inspections are post assembly inspections, pre and post erect inspections, equipment which is not in regular use, and inspections for certain modified, repaired or adjusted equipment. The routine inspections we will see little elaborately, and the non-routine inspections, for example, post assembly inspections or after assembly of a crane. You may have to see whether the crane can handle the load, is it really safe to load the load and so on. So, all these precautions you do, that is primarily called post assembly inspection. Before and after erection of erection processes, you have to do the inspections primarily to check of any wear and tear or any weak link has happened and so on. So, all these will be inspected. When the crane is not in use, okay, this regular use is generally referred as 3 months. So, within 3 months if the crane is not used, then you may have to have a detailed thorough inspections. Inspections of certain modified or repaired or adjusted equipment, maybe some portion of the crane was under repair and it has been repaired, or it is modified to suit some extra work and so on, then again you may have to do a thorough inspection on these circumstances. Now, let us talk about routine inspections. Number 1 is shift inspection. As the name implies, after every shift or every piece of work has been handled, there is a routine inspection which is carried out. So, this is primarily to control and drive mechanisms for apparent excessive wear of components, contamination of lubricants, water or any other foreign matter, air, hydraulic and any other pressurized lines for deterioration, for leakage and so on will be checked out. Hooks and latches are primarily inspected for any deformation, cracks, excessive wear or damage due to chemical or heat. Wire ropes primarily used should be also checked with respect to manufacturer specifications. Electrical apparatus should be checked for malfunctioning, signs of apparent excessive deterioration, dirt or moisture accumulation. Tires, if there are, should be also checked for inflation and condition. When the tires are inflated, then obviously you may have a overturning of the crane also can happen. Ground conditions around the equipment also should be checked for proper support, including ground settling under or around outriggers, stabilizers and so on, or maybe we should also look for water accumulation and other similar conditions. Operator cab windows should be clean, not seen any cracks, breaks or other deficiencies which can disrupt the view of the operator. Safety devices and operational aids also has to be checked. There are a lot of safety devices and operational aids inside the crane, okay, which has to be checked based on the criteria given by the manufacturer. If the inspection shows a safety device is not working properly, then that equipment should not be used unless it is repaired. Shift inspections generally are not documented. The next is monthly inspection. So, this as the name implies, it is done monthly, and this is done similar to the shift inspection, but it goes for documentation. The documentation of monthly inspection, it is maintained for a minimum of 3 months by the employer who conducts the inspection. It also has documentation on what are the items checked, results of the inspection, the person who done the inspection and etc. Annual or comprehensive inspections is done on a yearly basis. It is far more thorough and done by a real qualified person compared to shift or monthly inspections. structural members, deformity, cracking, significantly corroded and so on are all checked. And similarly, lot of other issues which we have seen in the shift inspections are also done in annual inspections. Outriggers or stabilizer pads, floats are all checked for excessive wear and cracks. If necessary, sometimes the crane is also disassembled to complete the annual inspection, and also the inspection must include functional testing. Okay. So, bit and pieces of functional testing on load carrying, rigging capacity and so on are also done sometimes to in order to determine and assess the crane safety. Corrective action also will be done as part of the annual inspections. If the qualified person who conducts the inspection identifies any deficiency in the items inspected and determines it is not safe to start the crane operation, then it has to be taken out for correction. If the qualified person determines that not presently a safety hazard, there are some deficiencies which has to be corrected in a long term, that also has to be taken care of and eliminated in the monthly inspection routines. Documentation, so this is also maintained and retained for a period of minimum 12 months by the employer who conducts the inspection. The items checked, the results of the inspection, the person who conducted the inspection, the date on which the inspection was done, all these are all documented. Now, keeping clear of the load, okay, as this was discussed in several places, whenever heavy equipments are used or mechanical sort of equipment are used in a site, then you have to be keeping away from the safe moving distance of the equipment. Okay, so, you have to be keep clearing of the load, not standing at a suspended load. So, all these basic norms has been discussed several places. So, safe hoisting routes. So, now when you comes to crane, so the complete swing radius has to be barricaded and no personnel are supposed to stand there. Wherever available, even the hoisting routes that minimize the exposure of employees to hoisting loads must be used to the extent consistent with public safety. While the operator is not moving a suspended load, no employee may be within the fall zone except for employees who are engaged in hooking, unhooking or guiding the load, engaged in the initial attachment of the load to a component or a structure, operating a concrete hopper or a bucket. Only these people are supposed to stand near a suspended load because they have to drag the load. For example, a concrete bucket, a person has to drag the bucket for pouring in the concrete. When employees in the fall zone are engaged in hooking, unhooking or guiding the load, then the materials being hoisted must be rigged in order to prevent unintentional displacement. So, the material should not be moving here and there. So, it has to be completely packed and so on. We will see what is the rigging practices available. Hooks with safe closing latches or their equivalent must be used. When the equipment is hitting on somewhere, then the latches should not be open. So, self closing latches should be always used. Exceptional one, the J hooks may be used for setting wooden trusses, so that the worker need not go on to the truss to open the hook. So, only in some exceptional cases open hooks are allowed. The materials must be rigged by a qualified rigger. Whenever you are receiving a load, employees needed to receive a load are only permitted to stand within the fall zone. The next issue is safeguarding away from the power lines. Power lines we have discussed enough when we were discussing on excavating equipment and so on. So, generally you should have a safe clearance distance away from the power lines. So, now if you see what is the power line minimum clearance distance with regard to crane operations. So, it is primarily referred as 20 feet okay, away from the power line for any type of work operation. Suppose if you have a clear 20 feet away from the power line, then the crane operations can function normally. You need not think about any safety precaution at all. Suppose if the crane operation including the crane, load line or rigging is very close to the 20 is less than the 20 feet proximity distance, then you may have to see what type of load the overhead power line is, and you have to take care of the clearance. Other way is you can also have a device which can automatically be fitted with the crane, which can also be stopping your power, prevent your movement of the crane and restricts the movement if you are very much close to the when you are very much closer to the maximum reach distance. And also you can also have a dedicated spotter whose work job is only to observe the clearance between the equipment and the power line minimum safe distance. So, who will be in continuous contact with the operator can also be appointed for maintaining the safe distance away from the power line. And the other option is you can also have lot of warning lines, barricades, line of signs with suitable flags, visible markings, so that it is very clear that the crane operator need not be going till the encroachment area. And last option, which is very feasible, you can still think of, is de-energize the power lines or ground the line, so that you are actually very safe in working with the overhead power lines. Now, if you see the overhead power lines, so you may have a hitting hazard. So, primarily this is with the rigging, it just got hit with the overhead power line. So, you should have the minimum safe distance away from the power lines. Okay. Now, based on the clearance, based on the voltage, you may have a required clearance distance. So, up to 50 kilowatts 10 feet distance, over 50 to 100 it is 15 feet distance. So, like this you will have a safe clearance distance. Okay. If nothing is known, then you should have maintain a 20 feet clear distance away from the overhead power lines. Boom. Now, the crane parts, primarily the boom, when a crane is used at different times with jibs of different lengths, then the appropriate safe working load shall be plainly marked in a prominent place on the crane. So, it should be visible to the crane operator, and the boom shall be also provided with a boom angle indicator if electronic display is not provided in the crane cabin. The crane shall not be loaded beyond the safe working load, which we normally say as SWL, and for this purpose either the load chart showing the safe working load at different radii of the boom shall be maintained and displayed close to the automatic safe load indicator. The automatic device for cutting off power to hoisting and derricking motions when the safe working load is exceeded also should be provided. Loads, before lifting, the load shall be checked to ensure it is safe. The load also should be packed so that it is not loose and falling down. When handling loads near to the maximum safe working load, the crane motions should be operated with real extra care. The slinger shall stand well clear of the load and shall not walk or move ahead when the load is suspended. Rope, the rope also should be properly secured. Actually, OSHA has a separate rope inspection policy also. Before lifting the operations commence, the hook shall be lowered to the required lowest point to ensure that at least 2 dead coils remain on the drum, and to the highest point to check that the drum capacity will not be exceeded. This is in case of lifting drums. Rigging practices, lifting equipment and slings shall not be overloaded. Erection shall be carried out only with the daylight in the day, and all rigging hardware below the boom point. Okay, as such, below from his all these points are considered as a load acting on the crane. It shall be noted that the shortest sling leg can carry more load. Okay. So, as such you can also determine what is the crane load and what is the hook capacity or the sling capacity can also be determined with the load chart, which is available along with the crane manufacturer. The slings shall be protected from sharp edges and corners, otherwise the slings may get broken by actually suitable packing of the load, so that it is not falling off and also it is not cutting or preventing wear and tear onto the slings. Whenever possible, avoid inefficient sling angles by using longer slings or a spreader beam. Okay. Suppose if this is a load to be lifted, do not carry this along with a short sling. Okay. Better you can think of putting a longer link. So, this is not a, this can carry only half the load compared to this. It shall be ensured the bending is not permitted near any splice or attached fitting, as shown in the sketch here. So, this sharp severe bendings are all not allowed in the slinging practices. Do not pull slings from under a load when the load is resting on the sling, as shown here. Do not leave the slings lying where heavy loads may be set down on top of them or where vehicles may drive over them, so that the slings are getting damaged. Damaged slings wherever should be repaired before they are placed in the storage area. and the wire ropes shall never be wrapped around the hook. Okay, this is what is a wrapping around the hook. So, this shall not be done. Load shall be blocked before the slings are unhooked. Okay, you should actually secure the load, see to that it is not moving, and then only unlock the hooks. The riggers shall stay away from when the slings under the load are released. No person shall work under the suspended load, okay, to prevent the struck by hazards. Some of the OSHA practices, operator cannot leave the cab until the engine is running. When the engine is running and the platform is occupied, so he can leave the cab only when the crane is put in a neutral position. Workers should wear all the PPE including hard hats. Workers are supposed to keep their arms inside the platform during raising, lowering and positioning and so on. Only the signal person are supposed to give signals to the operators. Only in case of emergency, any person can make the crane operator to stop the crane. Discontinue the work in very bad weather, especially when there is rain or lightning and thunder. Work practices, no riding on material hoist except you can do it only under inspection or for maintenance purposes. No employees are supposed to work under suspended loads except when you are doing the starting connections, when hooking up and unhooking and so on, then only, or while moving the concrete buckets and other issues, then only you are supposed to stand. Multiple lift rigging are allowed, but you may have to be very clear with what are the members you are rigging in the process. 5 members maximum, and there should be a clear distance of 7 feet between the members, and the members may be most often should be similar, and the rigging should always be done at the center of gravity. First of all, you should know where is the center of gravity and tie the rigs along together and rig the top one first and then start digging the bottom one in the last. Hoist safe. This is primarily a snapshot which I have taken from the OSHA training manuals. So, hoist safe. So, H stands for how heavy is the load, what are the operating limitations of the crane and rigging, when was the last inspection performed, how was the sling angles will affect the lifting capacity, have you performed a test lift to check the stability, move the load with smooth and steady action, is the area clear of personnel and instructions, can the load be flown and landed safely, how will the environment affect the safety of the lift. I think I have covered all of these for the hoist safe operations. Some more recap. Cranes are one of the most dangerous pieces of equipment in a construction site, and they cause more accidents than any other equipment seen so far. Cranes are large and difficult to control. Small miscalculations can cause severe injury and even death to anyone who is close by. Okay. So, this is OSHA quick card on protect yourself from crane safety. Cranes are to be operated only by qualified and trained personnel. Designated competent person must inspect the crane and all crane controls before use. Be sure the crane is on a firm or stable surface and level. During disassembly, do not unlock or remove pins unless sections are blocked and secured stable. This assembly, disassembly operations and safety I have not covered in this lecture. Actually, there are so many other issues which I haven't covered, and crane safety, if you want to understand completely, there are lot of material available in the public domain. Fully extend the outriggers and barricade accessible areas inside the crane swing radius. Watch for overhead electric power lines and maintain at least a 10-foot safe working clearance on the power lines. Inspect all the rigging prior to use and do not trap the hoist lines around the load. Be sure to use the correct load chart for the crane's current configuration and set up the load weight and the lift path. Do not exceed the load chart capacity while making lifts. Raise the load a few inches, hold, verify, balance, test all the braking system before moving and proceeding with delivering the load. Do not move the loads over the workers. Be sure to follow signals and manufacturer instructions while operating the cranes. Some more fact sheets. Cranes and derricks in construction, assembly, disassembly, cranes and derricks in construction, wire rope inspections, then cranes and derricks in construction, qualified rigger, cranes and derricks in construction, signal person qualification. So, like this there are so many documents also available as a quick recap as to follow as a checklist when you are operating on cranes. and this complete lecture was prepared based on all these documents. OSHA 1926 subpart N, cranes, derricks, hoists, elevators and conveyors, and subpart CC, cranes and derricks in construction, IS code 13367 part 1 1992 on safe use of cranes, code of practice, and also the other OSHA training manuals and documents. Thank you.